Okay.
We're all new at this.
I'm going to call to order. All rise for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Note all in attendance. Public comment I have, Carla Weissel.
Carla Weissel, Beach, Illinois. Regarding tonight's vote of raising the tax levy, Finance Committee Chairperson Paul Meyer has repeatedly been passing the buck and has not been taken responsible for the large deficit spending of $1.8 million. She frequently has discussed how the large deficit spending is the previous board's fault. On the contrary to Finance Chairperson Paul Meyer, the previous majority of the board was conservative in its spending. In contrast, all but Mr. Hernandez voted for the current $1.8 million in deficit spending that are almost all for fixed costs. When the previous board voted for deficit spending, it was fully attributed to upgrades to technology, facilities, and/or projects. Now this board, with the exception of Member Hernandez, for fiscal year 2022 voted for large deficit spending for fixed costs. Mrs. Paulmeyer indicated that it was for salary increases and repeatedly stated it was the previous board's votes. In committee, suggested in dispute from the superintendent's report of July 9, 2021, quote, Chairman Herman and committee suggested a 6% raise for those employees, unquote, referring to employees not covered by the CBA. This should have been open discussion. When did the current 200U board violate the Open Meetings Act again and discuss these raises in executive session? For the minutes, the 200U current board then voted to approve the raises on July 14, 2021. So that accounts for some of the salary increases. However, Finance Chairperson Paulmeyer states it was salary increase caused by the previous board, causing the $1.8 million in deficit spending, which is not the cause. Previous boards had upgrades to show for their deficit spending. This year's budget had large increases over the last year's budget with only $200,000 in projects to show for it. Then there's President Pappas, who led the Facilities Committee, which will spend over half of the reserves. If included in the discussion is the deficit spending amount of $1.8 million for this fiscal year. President Pappas has repeatedly stated that it is irresponsible to hold on to so much money. And now the Pappas suspend it all. Will 200U even adhere to the already large deficit spending budget? President Pappas wanted air conditioning. Eventually the board had to admit that the HVAC was not for the mold because there was no mold. Additionally, there were scheduled air quality tests every 6 months, which never revealed any problems with air quality. Furthermore, they left out the junior high school air conditioning and didn't even obtain bids. Why? Pappas explained, quote, the configuration and infrastructure of that building would not allow it, unquote. That statement doesn't even make sense. Now the 200U will have spent down their reserves into the $5 million range, and they are deficit spending $1.8 million or even more. Don't blame the previous board for this board's financial problem.
Thank you. All right, so tax levy hearing.
All right, thank you. So, this is our truth and taxation hearing. And so what is a truth and taxation hearing? Well, it's very simply saying it allows the voters to come on out and hear a presentation on the proposed local property tax levy that is going to be affecting their taxes next year, not this year. That was your levy from last year. And so why must we actually hold one of those? Well, if a school district ever proposes a greater than 5% tax levy increase, you must have a truth and taxation hearing. We are a tax cap district, so therefore we can never go up more than the 5% unless CPI somehow balloons. Actually, if you've watched the news recently, CPI right now is at 6.8, but that is not the number that we got to use for our levy. So here are some important terms you guys need to know. The levy. The levy is what we are suggesting or anticipating your taxes are going to be, and it's based on your EAV. That number comes from the clerk's office. It does not come from me. It does not come from anybody in the state level. It is the Will County Clerk's office that provides me that number. Your extension is the actual amount that you get. So when you guys approved the budget back in October, those were the extension numbers. So when you saw the ed fund levy, that is actually what you got from taxpayers, not what you levied for. There's a slight difference in those two numbers, and you really don't actually know the real numbers until March. And then your aggregate, once again, that is the number that we receive for our kids in a given year. It does not include any kind of long-term debt, and for reference, that is the junior high for one more year. So, once again, if I have $5 of a total tax rate, and one of those dollars happens to be used off of construction, your aggregate is the $4. So the money that actually goes to the school for kids that year. Okay, everything else was everything else that has to do with construction was proposed way back when it was created. So what is our proposed total levy? Again, proposed. So last year's extension was 10.9. This year's, with the CPI at 1.4% and the increase in EAV, would be 11.12. That is an increase of 1.7% overall to the total school's budget. I'll say that's it, 1.7%. So is that 1.7% what we use for this truth and taxation hearing? The answer to that is no. The truth in taxation is based on the aggregate increase, not the overall. So the 1.7 increase is including the extension. So what are we looking at is actually that number right there. So 8.7 to 9.0. So that's a 3.2% increase in the actual aggregate levy. Now, will we get 9.02? And if anybody were to stand in front of you until they know the answer, they are lying to you. Again, this is a proposed levy. Will County can't even give you that number. But using the formula that is provided to us by the state, every superintendent's in the same boat right now. Using the 1.4% CPI, new construction, everything like that. So 3.2% is actually the increase for $300,000 into next year's budget. So is that the number we use? Yep. It's less than 5%. So do we actually have to have this hearing right now? Nope. So why the heck do we have a truth and taxation hearing in Beecher? Because I want everybody to know exactly what we're doing, where our money is, and where our money is coming from, and what we're asking for. So, if you told me that the whole thing is going to be 11.2, but the aggregate's only 9.0, where's the other 2.2? Well, that's the extension we talked about. That's the construction. And next year will be the last year on that bond. It is done after next year's levy. Or I'm sorry, this year's levy, next year's taxes. Okay, this is the last time you will have to levy for that bond, which is a very important thing to remember as we progress through all of this. So this year's rate was 6.39, next year's rate would be 6.10. Please notice it says decrease. Oh, this doesn't work. I'm so sad right now. Oh, no, it works. Oh, it doesn't work on a TV because it's not a... Stat! Give me a good one. So you notice the actual rate went down 4.5%.
Could you repeat that one more time?
The rate went down 4.5%.
Just want to make sure.
Again, I'm not saying your taxes went down 4.5%. The rate of which you are taxed by the school district goes down 4.5%. Does anybody have any questions about what that means?
Just to be clear,
Yes.
if your property value went up, you're gonna see a tax increase on your bill.
Correct.
If it didn't, you're not.
Correct. So if your property stayed stagnant from last year to this year, your property taxes from the school will go down. However, to believe that your property did no appreciation is hard to believe. So that's something really important to remember. Again, we use the word anticipated because it's all on projection. All on projection until they actually come through with it in March. And then in March, they actually provide you with the real numbers and you certify them. So, what does it all mean? And that's what Mr. Mazurek literally just said. If your property did not appreciate at all in value, the tax bill you see next year will be 4.5% less than this year, because the levy is going down 4.5%, if approved. This is the same video I showed at the finance meeting. As long as nobody is strongly opposed to this, I'll put it on the website, but to watch, everybody watch the same video a second time for 3 minutes. And is everybody all right with that? Okay. Plus, I'm not wearing a tie, and it's embarrassing. So, you notice if you guys ever, some of you guys sat through Brad for 3 years, this is all the same things he did. I added a few things here just so you can kind of see some additional pieces of information. This is what your levy has done over the last 6 years. Your limiting rate levy has gone down every year. Okay, your extension has gone down every year. Your property values, by the way, continue to go up every year. Just for reference, in 2020, the 507, the 2.1% decrease, your property value went up 7% in Beecher. Your EAV went up 7%. So, again, people ask, well, how are my taxes going up? You just told me it's decreased. Your property value, if it goes up, that's a phenomenal thing. You want your property value to go up. Okay? So that's why you might see a small increase. And the other thing I hear a lot is, well, we're at the top of the chain. It's amazing. We pay the most taxes anywhere in the whole wide world. No, you don't. You don't. We're middle of the road. We're in a heck of a lot better position than some of those schools. We're not as well off as some of the others. You definitely are paying 8.04. By the way, if you don't know, the reason that there's two schools like BBCHS with 61, BBCHS is the high school district, 61 is their attached elementary district. So if you live in District 61 elementary, you have to pay the elementary and the high school. You have to pay them both. You don't get to pick and choose. So it'd be like saying the high school is, you know, a $2.89 and then Beecher Elementary is $2. Well, yeah, the high school is cheaper than us, but it's because it's a high school district. So that's why you see a bunch of additions to it. And then, as I noted in the finance meeting, the Piatone one, every 2 years they sell $4.5 million in working cash bonds. And that costs their taxpayers almost $700,000 to pay off. So taxpayer money is going to a bank in New York to continue to balance their budget.
And they've asked for a referendum.
They
right?
did.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, they did 2 years ago what we were hoping to be successful in this year. So.
Education is key.
Correct. And we're going to keep looking at that. Okay? And then this is also the other thing I showed you. I'm a visual person. The big orange blob is your salaries. The big orange blob is your local revenue. It's really important that that big orange blob stays relatively close. Because that tiny little green blob, I promise you, is not going to get any bigger. The state is not, I'm sorry, the federal government isn't going to be giving us any more money. The state, I mean, they gave us some ESSER money, but they're not going to give us anything extra. It's been 1.8 million over the last 4 years. This last year was 2.1 simply because of ESSER. They've increased that a little bit. So, oh, I don't know how I got there.
Where is that?
That's my happy picture. That's quality stuff right there.
So I'm here. So that is your levy in a nutshell. 489 for the aggregate, it's 121 for the, yep, 121 for the extension, for a rate of 6.10, a decrease in rate by 4.5%.
Looks good.
Any questions from anybody else? Fantastic.
Okay. No questions, then I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful. Does anybody need to excuse themselves?